All right, so Daniel's going to talk about when cloud native meets legacy. Over to you, Daniel.
Daniel Voss from MuleSoft here. Been able to follow the discussion, really enjoyed it, following it on YouTube here, and I've subscribed, Paul, so that's all good. MuleSoft is in the business of connecting things, very often with cloud, but also with on-prem. Hence, we're going to talk a lot today about when those two worlds meet. We work with some of the big guys like Netflix and Facebook and Apple, all different parts of media. You know, we also work with Channel 4, Sky, Condé Nast, some of the other publishers and so on. So a whole range of different use cases across media, and really refreshing to hear. I think it was David talking about microservices so much, and you know, the concept of innovating by building more microservices on some of the ones you've already built, which is, you know, really part of our whole ethos as well. Also going to talk a little bit about multi-cloud environments, because if you're anything like most of the companies I talk to, there's always more than one cloud in existence in whichever company. And if we're talking about content production or distribution or ad sales, broadcasting, content sales, we're generally seeing silos within those organizations. Really typically, you know, one part of the organization, they're using AWS, they're doing things their way. Literally in the room next door, there's someone else doing things all in with Microsoft. Just because it suits their use case and what they're doing. And down the corridor, you got the data scientist guys, and they just love BigQuery, and they're all in with GCP. And all of that can be happening in, you know, a relatively small organization. I can't see your faces right now, but I'm hope that you're nodding that, you know, this is really what we see every single day. And you know, nothing really wrong with that. That's just how it is. We also see within the supply chain major silos, and I think it was again David who was talking about batch processing and talking about folders. You know, we have seen in other industries major innovations in the exchanging of data. And in the media industry, not so much. We're still seeing that, you know, the way it's always been done for a couple of decades has been, I do my bit and I put it in a folder, and then you look for that, and then you take it out, and so on. You know, that's, you know, just an observation really, but, you know, there are a lot of changes happening in other industries to make things, you know, perhaps slicker, perhaps less prone to errors, and even more sort of event driven. So inevitably there are going to be sort of legacy applications. I'm sure that everyone, either in the company you're with now or where you've worked in the past, you know, somebody mentioned a major UK broadcaster earlier, that these massive legacy applications, quite often monolithic, quite often they've had the hell customized out of them over many decades, and it's really opaque as to what is going on inside there, and nobody really wants to touch it because if you do, you might break it. But you know, it's there, and you have to sort of work with it, accommodate it, and this whole area I would put into a wider bucket that you might call legacy modernization. And that's, you know, working with these legacy apps to make them, you know, maybe less complex, hopefully reduce costs, make collaboration easier, and so on. And you know, sometimes more scalable, although that doesn't actually always work out like that. And so the other thing I'll talk about is a concept called API-led connectivity. There's been a bit of talk about APIs already. But this is a concept about using APIs in a reusable way. So not just designing a connection from A to B, but thinking more strategically about, could you use a series of APIs to get from A to B, which would then be reusable assets. And just full disclosure, I'm leaning very heavily on a lot of content that the DPP produced. Maybe some of you know the DPP organization, and there's a bunch of reports that you can see for yourself. You can download for yourself around integration. Or if you're not a member, let me know, and I can help you get hold of those. So these legacy applications, so like I said, most people still have them. They're huge, they're customized, they're difficult to deal with, generally written in some ancient language, can be very hard to find engineers who can actually support it, and if you do, they're going to be really costly. But yet you need to integrate with those applications, and in many occasions you're looking for ways to transition away from them, but in a manageable fashion. That's not something you do overnight. And lots of you will have looked at the idea of taking a big problematic on-prem application and trying to turn it into a big problematic cloud application, and realize that's not always such a good idea. But when we look at accommodating these sort of legacy apps, the fastest way to do it is create point-to-point integrations. So you're working in AWS, that's where your app sits. The monolithic application is somewhere else, on-prem maybe, and you simply code from your application to that one. As I said before, in the next room, someone's doing exactly the same thing on Azure, and across the corridor, someone's doing exactly the same thing in Google Cloud. And then multiply that by the number of different apps you've got, and you're getting a big spaghetti mess of different integrations. And no one in the Azure silo knows what the AWS guys are doing, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody's reusing anything. There's a lot of duplication of effort. In fact, I was talking to a publishing company. In fact, we saw their logo on screen earlier, and I was talking about the spaghetti mess, and there were sort of nods, and then they said, "Well, we don't really have that." So I was like, "Oh, well, a bit surprised to hear that." They said, "What we've got is more like a ball of mud in terms of our integrations. We don't know what's going on inside that ball of mud. We're afraid to touch it in case something breaks, and just accommodating that is a huge pain, getting visibility of anything inside there." So that's kind of one of the big challenges, working with these point-to-point integrations. But I know for sure you're all doing it because it's just the quickest way, and demands of business mean that sometimes we just do things the quickest way. And this could be absolutely fine if nothing ever changed, but that's the problem. Things are always changing, as we know. Can't have a good presentation without a what do you call these things? Word cloud. So there you go. And constantly, we're seeing either from the wider supply chain, or from upstairs, or from the market, there's continuous need for changing the way we're doing things, innovating, and that means changes are required to the integrations, changes are required to the legacy apps, and that's when the cost goes up, the complexity goes up, and the problems start entering. So what we like to recommend is taking an approach that's more Velcro than superglue. So if you superglue something together, you superglue it because you don't ever want it to change, ever. You're done, broken vase, whatever, superglue it together, and that's it. You can never mess with that. And that has, well, obviously very, very limiting. If you think about an industrial Velcro sort of approach where you can connect things, in a flexible way. You can have multiple things connected at each connection point. If you then want to change something, you can detach that Velcro and reattach it somewhere else. That kind of Velcro approach is what we would hope to get to. And what you're really getting with that Velcro approach is more sort of decoupled, more modular, microservices style, reusable assets. Just going to pause there for a sip of my drink. My throat good. Good. So when we look at legacy apps, there's a couple of different paths we see for modernizing those legacy systems. One is around modernization, service modernization, and the other is application re-architecture. On the service modernization side, this is kind of the easy path if the application that you're modernizing is basically perfect. It already does everything you need it to do. You don't need to make changes to kind of the underlying function in there. And so what you're really looking to do is just get access to it. And this is a big and, there's web services exposed or even APIs that you can access. So that's a kind of a nice path to go down. The other one is when there aren't web services exposed, and it makes things a lot more tricky. And also the application underneath is actually no longer fit for purpose. There's a huge number of changes in response to business requirements, industry requirements that are needed within the app, and this becomes sort of a bigger problem and one which takes a little bit more thinking through, but is actually a lot more typical. Imagine if you're selling content, because that's what you do, and you're bundling it in a certain way, but now you want to change that. You want to bundle it completely differently to respond to market requirements, or maybe one of my customers is actually doing this in the music business. They want their customers to be able to browse their catalogs completely independently and self-serve access to the content, and that can be quite different to the way they've done things historically. And there's an API for that. There's a way to accommodate that. So, number of different ways of approaching this, but what we would say in terms of recommendations when you're doing this is look for smaller, discrete, modular APIs or opportunities to produce these smaller, discrete APIs rather than a single API that does everything. Lots of your internal customers aren't going to need access to everything that API produces. It can be a lot better practice to have more smaller, discrete APIs. You can control, read-only access in some cases, and really get a much better handle with creating these smaller, discrete, and critically reusable API assets. And the other thing that comes along when you start taking this approach is that we can work towards something we call composability. So if you are thinking more strategically and not just going point to point with your integration, but creating these microservices style APIs, each time you create one of these, you're creating something that's a reusable asset that someone, either in the room next door or across the corridor can potentially use in the future. And what we're actually seeing is that by taking this approach, different businesses are finding different ways to monetize. So, maybe for you, combining a few APIs is a way for you to get to, whatever app you need to present to, but actually maybe for someone else externally, getting access to that API is what they want to buy. That's the quote unquote product they want to purchase. So lots of opportunities come up if you get this this API-led approach and this composability. I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we approach this ourselves. And the way we approach API-led connectivity, as we call it, is with a layered approach. So the first layer is the system layer. So this is anything where you're unlocking data. So you'd have an API to get to your app that's, for example, in AWS. And I'm going to keep saying that word reuse, because once you've created that app, that API to connect to that app, that's a reusable asset now. Someone in 3 months' time, 3 weeks' time, a year's time can find that API. They can see the documentation around it as to what it does and potentially use it for a completely different purpose as to what you intended it for when you created it. So that's your system layer, and that can be cloud apps, on-prem apps, SaaS apps, anything that's unlocking data. Next, we have the process layer. So what we're doing here is separating things like business logic, separating things like transformation, separating things like orchestration, so that every time you need to do something like that or a new use case comes up, you're not messing with the API that's unlocking the data. You're doing that separately. So you can create as many of these process layer APIs as you would like, and you can actually start composing them together. And then finally, the experience layer. So this is anything that is like a trigger. It gets presented to a portal, a website, a mobile app, reporting system, maybe externally. And again, because the experience layer is done separately, if you have everything you need to produce, the application you need, except that it needs to be a mobile app, then it's only the API for the experience layer for the mobile app you need to produce, because everything else you can reuse. So maybe that's where you are today, and then when use case 3 comes up, you can use a lot of the work that's been done before to compose that solution together. Similarly with use case 4. And by combining those building blocks of existing APIs, you can then connect that to your new experience API, which is for your mobile app, and you're probably going to do the work that would have taken you X amount of time in something like a third of the time because of reuse. So I'm sorry I can't see you, so if you're all looking really confused, and I'm going really quite quickly through this. But any questions about that kind of layered approach? I don't even know if I'll be able to hear you with the questions, but we can try.
Can you hear us, Daniel?
I can now, yep.
Do we have any questions? Comments? No? With the experience. Okay. You might have to just speak up.
So with the experience layer, I guess that's quite easy to define what goes in there. How do you separate? What are the key differences between the 2 layers below that to decide, what element goes in which of those layers?
Yeah, I think I got that. So if you can still hear me, the system layer should be the simplest one to define. In fact, in many ways, like you said, the experience layer is quite easy to understand. The system layer should be doing something very, very limited, which is only unlocking the data from that particular application, whether that's a finance system or a rights management system or a content management system, whatever it is. That's all it does. There's no business logic in there. It's not transforming anything, which means that everything that's not unlocking data and not presenting data externally has to be done in the process layer. So that's where your mashing together data from multiple systems internally and maybe even externally, and transforming it into the format you need to then, for example, present to the experience layer. Oh, did that answer the question?
I'm getting a nod here.
Okay.
No, I think, are you done, Daniel?
No, I'll just finish off. So really, I mean, what we're looking at, what the results we're seeing from our clients is faster project delivery is the number one thing that we're seeing, and that comes from this reuse approach. So you do the hard yards, building your first batch of APIs, and you're thinking much more strategically about how you build those. So you don't just build an integration from A to B. You're thinking more strategically about, could I do that in 3 or 4 steps? And as I do that, I'm creating 3 or 4 reusable digital assets. The idea being that when project 2 comes along, project 3, you're reusing so many more of those assets that your delivery speed is going to get much, much quicker. So to summarize, please think very carefully about that super glue versus Velcro thing. There's lots of times when point-to-point is right, but it's not always right. And I think I was actually reading something that Paul commented on today on LinkedIn about technical debt and pressures from the business to meet deadlines and so on. But certainly, please do think about the super glue approach versus Velcro when it comes to technical debt. Hand in hand with that is the reuse approach. Can you create a number of steps, a number of what we would call APIs, reusable APIs, to get from one point to another, because those will become valuable building blocks, valuable assets that someone else can use in the future. And composability. So, what is it that I can't even think of that might be required in the future, which, if I don't take the quick way, would take a little bit longer and create a reusable API, somebody might be able to compose that into something else in the future. So that's me. That's how to contact me. MuleSoft has its annual event at the end of the month. It's a sort of invitation-only thing, but very happy to get any of you lot onto the invite list. Just get in touch, and I will do my best on that. And that was it. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And can we have a big, yeah, because. And thank you especially, Daniel, for doing this when you're not feeling so well and you're managing to do it over Teams. That's awesome. So thank you so much for that effort.
Hope to see you all at the next one.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming, and it's so great to see so many people here. Yeah, no, it really, and I really mean that. I mean, when David and I first talked about doing this, we talked about, maybe we'll get 15 people around the table over here. Yeah. So
sort of meeting.
Yeah. So this is awesome. Yeah. This is absolutely, and we are blown away by the response to this, and absolutely, it's great to see you all. And we've pegged this date, 27th of July. Russell Trafford Jones has assured me that he is going to be able to do that date, notwithstanding other members of his family getting COVID. But Russell's talk is lined up for them. I think we've got a couple of other people lined up for that. So if you can put that in your diary, that would be amazing. And we are still talking about venues, but we may be back here. I feel like we're going to outgrow this venue, but we may be back here for the next one, and then see where we go. Bigger screen. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. And so I appreciate that the tech challenge tonight has been quite significant getting everything on YouTube, and also getting Daniel on Teams as well. So I appreciate everyone for bearing with us on that. And obviously, we are going to the pub, which is, as I said earlier, you go out the door, you cross the road, you take a left, you walk up to the end of the road, you take a right, you cross the road again, and it's right there. It's called the 1 Ton, and we will all be going there. Some of the people from Arkiva will be, and also any other volunteers, will be staying here to just tidy up a bit and put this place back to rights, because obviously it's going to be used for office stuff tomorrow. So thank you, by the way, to all the people from Arkiva who are here tonight as well to help out, and all of the things that you've done, moving chairs around and all of that. So it's all appreciated. It's all appreciated. So yes, and obviously, we've got a link tree, we've got a QR code. Just like, subscribe, follow, all of that bullshit. Smash the bell, all of that. The more of that you do, the more it helps us. So that's great. And 27th of July. Thank you very much.